I keep having this dream. I'm just staring into the black between the stars. There's something there. I can feel it. Hate us.
Levels in Prey are transitioned between with loading screens while traveling through these bulkhead doors. There is only one way out of the Neuromod division.
You made it. Ready for your first real view of the world?
Now look, this scene feels like it's meant to be some grand reveal that you are on Talos 1 in space, but the doors leading up here literally say Talos 1. But wait, there was a sky shining through the ceiling of the Neuromod division. Guess what, that's a looking glass too. The lobby is a big open area with a ton of little rooms, offices and divisions, and is not linear in the way the previous level was. First of all, let's talk about how grand, extravagant and luxurious this space station is. Remember that this is a space station orbiting the moon. Looking at modern space stations like the ISS or Tiangong, they are more like tiny little habitation capsules, just big enough to keep the occupants alive and able to work. Space in space is worth its volume in gold, because every little gram of material that you're launching into space has to be accounted for. Everything you want to send out requires you to add proportionally as much fuel, and this fuel also has to be carried, so that adds its own fuel requirement. As a result, fuel constitutes around 90% of the mass of rockets as they are launching. Sending things to space is exorbitantly expensive, and in fact TranStar can afford to splurge on all of this wood, ceramic and gold just to make the station look pleasant, firmly places it among the richest and most powerful companies in existence, much more so than anything we have presently. Thankfully, Jovan was the only living person we've come across, and the lobby, once bustling with life and activity, is now eerily empty and silent. It's not empty of corpses though, you're practically wading through the bodies here, some transformed, others not. Whatever is happening, the Typhon are clearly winning, and simply wrestling back control is not an option anymore. Something drastic has to be done. At the bottom floor, we've got a giant shaft in the center, housing the main lift. Of course, having access to it now would have been too convenient, so it is malfunctioning and stuck in the Arboretum, the top level, for some unknown reason. Besides the lobby, it also goes down to life support. On the other side, there's a main reception of sorts, greeting arrivals coming straight out of the shuttle bay. Inaccessible, of course. Despite this tutorial prompt telling us Talos 1 is open to explore, at the moment we can only go one way. The TranStar exhibit sits along the edge, detailing an abridged history of both the company and Talos 1. It doesn't hold any details about the Typhon, which makes it not particularly interesting or accurate. Their existence was a secret to the majority of Talos 1 crew members, even more so the general public. What you need to know for now is that Prey takes place in an alternate timeline in which JFK survived the assassination attempt and turned the space race around from a competition between the USA and the USSR into a cooperative venture. In 1963, they worked together on building the Kletka facility, Russian for cage, which would become the foundations for Talos 1. In 1980, a mysterious Pobeg incident results in 2 deaths and a halt on the project. In 2025, TranStar as we know it comes to be, and buys Kletka to use and develop further, and 2030 is given as the year that Talos 1 became fully operational. I do not know Russian, but the name Pobeg should raise suspicion if you know any Slavic languages. It means escape. Passing out of the shuttle bay, one must get past the security station. It's locked with a keycard terminal that can't be hacked, but you can also get in there by a narrow little maintenance hatch above the door. Inside you will find the shotgun, your first proper firearm, and a very effective one indeed. We can also snoop on some emails to Sarah, or Sarai, Elazar, Chief of Security on Talos 1. She knew about the Typhon, as this knowledge is critical to her performing her job, but one of the emails makes it clear other officers, like Elias Black, did not. Another is directly from Alex Yu, telling her to detain Dmitry Bowser. He was the security guard from the intro whose aim is about as good as that of my soldiers in XCOM when he's trying to kill an alien, but when it comes to clocking innocent bystanders. In this room, Elias Black also left his character sheet for a tabletop RPG called Fatal Fortress. In Prey, this is a game that some characters have gathered to play together, and the name is a reference to Arcane's first game, Arx Fatalis, which means Fatal Fortress. In the nearby cell, Dmitry's corpse sits on a chair that springs limbs and attacks us. He left a note saying how scared he is and concerned about the things aboard the station. I'm starting to feel like people on station haven't been shooting straight. Big words from the guy who fucking blasted an innocent person's brains out with a shotgun.
Headshot.
Security workstations are different from normal workstations. While they have email capabilities, each one also has an area map file you can download onto your transcribe, and also a list of all Talos 1 employees. Each of them has a tracking bracelet that relays their vital signs and also lets you track their position with a special quest marker. There are 286 positions that can be tracked, but some of them are volunteers who can only be viewed on particular workstations. Almost every crew member is accounted for in the game and can be located, alive or most likely dead. This is a level of world building and attention to detail that most game studios would never bother with. The final room of interest on the bottom floor is the employee orientation, where a part of training was being conducted. All that's being conducted there now is a bunch of mimics getting shot with turrets. Moving up, we've got human resources, where we learn that all of Talos 1 employees get neuromods, with particular standouts getting even more. However, TranStar reserves the right to remove them at their discretion, which totally does not sound like something an evil megacorp would do, right? Rule number 47, it is not okay to eat other crew members' lunches. If you are hungry, let me know. Thomas Tucker over here has been accepting Earthside applicants, including Morgan, complaining about Hunter Hale making more money than him, and resolving a quarrel between Josh Dalton and Lane Carpenter. On the other side, we've got the Trauma Center, the biggest medical facility on the station, and also packed with important information. Roaming these halls are phantoms, now proper threats we must face. When sneaking near them, you will very often hear them saying human phrases, but not ones that make sense in the context. They don't speak to you, they don't speak between each other, it's like they just repeat phrases someone said without knowing at all what they mean. Some lines are talking about the Typhon, like,
I used to wish we weren't alone in the universe.
Or,
where do you suppose they came from?
While others are just utterly random, like,
You seem frustrated.
Or,
What does it look like? The shape in the glass.
However, this goes for when they're idle. When they're looking for you or directly attacking, phantoms suddenly understand exactly what they're saying, and will say,
Come out.
and
Shh. Hang on. Someone's coming.
sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Robert?
Someone's coming.
To access the meat of the lore in the Trauma Center, we will need to take on two phantoms, one of which being an elemental fire variant. Most concerning of all, aiming at the normal one makes the HUD produce the name Garfield Langley. This means they're carrying his tracking bracelet, and the implications are very unnerving indeed. The phantoms are much tougher than mimics. They can zip around and fire elemental projectiles. At this stage in the game, every one of them will take considerable efforts to bring down. Gluing them, and then using your wrench will take off a chunk of their health, but it will require several cycles. My preferred method to get rid of this particular duo is to use turrets. You can fight 2 working ones in this area, or repair a broken one for a third as well. Then lure them out one at a time into said turrets while drawing their aggro, to keep the flimsy machines alive, and use glue to slow them down. Matthias Cole, the counselor, has his office here, and on his computer there are 3 session logs with Lorenzo Calvino, Sarah Elazar, and Danielle Show. Sarah's log is unpleasant to listen to.
Sarai, come in.
It's Sarah, but you can call me Chief Elazar. Matt.
Matthias, please. Forgive me, but your name is Sarai in the file, because your last tour of duty was the evacuation, and reports from there.
I saved as many as I could. For every soldier we lost, we were able to save 100 civilians.
Yes. Tragic. Still, to lose soldiers under your command.
The two have some animosity for each other, and Matthias tries guilt-tripping her over lives lost of her subordinates as a result of something called the evacuation. Well, she seems to have moved past it, which honestly makes him look like a fucking imbecile. What exactly was the evacuation is not certain. There are 3 parts of a book called Survivor's Account of the Evacuation, scattered throughout the game, 2 of which can be found in the lobby as well. The brief rundown is that the narrator dropped off their dog at the groomer and things suddenly went to shit. Fighter jets flying overhead, pink smoke coming from a stadium, sirens, people running, a policeman directing them to a bomb shelter. An airliner flew over the stadium and turned into glitter without a sound. The narrator fell and got knocked out. When they woke up, a military truck picked them up along with some other survivors. Nobody could tell what was happening. The pink smoke has enveloped the entire city now. When they heard shooting, the soldiers disembarked the truck, told the narrator to drive it as far west as it would go, and ran towards the shooting. When the fuel ran out, the survivors spent the night in the desert, listening and watching bombs and artillery wreak havoc on their city. They also mentioned that now they know the cause of this incident was scientists thinking they knew everything, but they did not. In order to present the most plausible theory as to what this was, I first have to go over some more gameplay mechanics. Aboard Talos 1, you will find recyclers and fabricators. The former can be used to reduce items into 4 basic components: organic, synthetic, mineral, and exotic. You can recycle anything you can put into your inventory in a recycler, but you will mostly be compacting trash items, ones which have no use at all, beyond the material yields they give. Test tube samples, banana peels, crumpled papers, broken hardware, and Typhon organs. You will definitely have collected some by now, and your office just above has a recycler and fabricator. It's not difficult to notice their high exotic yields, and figure out that exotic matter is Typhon matter. However, that's not the only way to recycle things. Recycler charges are consumable throwable items invented on Talos 1, which suck in props, items, and living creatures in a radius before compacting everything into little balls of matter. They can also be used to remove heavy barricades without investing into leverage, and are extremely convenient at removing containers of radioactive waste, which somehow just instantly lose their properties. Just be careful not to recycle anything useful, because the yields are honestly kind of pitiful. Fabricators, on the other hand, utilize these raw materials, in combination with a fabricator plan, in order to... I don't even know why I'm finishing the sentence, because it's pretty self-explanatory what they do. So, given the disappearing plane and destroyed city along with the mention of scientists thinking they could control something beyond anyone's control, and Sarah saying the disaster was not natural but man-made, the most likely candidate, as for the culprit, is recycler technology going haywire and a military that had no idea what they were fighting. Before we leave, there's a mind-controlled Trevor J. Young in quarantine, and Matthias's notes nearby indicate he doesn't realize it is the case, attributing his strange state to shock and neuromod removal. Mind-controlled humans will run at you and their heads will explode, in a gruesome fashion as they get near. If you want to save them, the stun gun will remove the effect and knock them unconscious. After some time passes, they will have made their way to safety and disappear. On security stations, humans can have their status as no life signs, indicating they're dead or phantomized, nominal, meaning they're alive and physically somewhere in the world, and safe, meaning they're alive but gone. Trying to track them instantly fails to find their bracelet and they cannot be encountered anywhere. This is what happens to humans freed from mind control, generally. So, not only can Typhon disguise themselves as the world around them, they can also mind control humans and do something to turn them into more Typhon. In their own words,
"Moving inside us like disease."
Clearing out the trauma center as early as possible is worth it, seeing as it's where you will be able to access a medical operator first. They heal you to full and remove any negative status effects and traumas for free, as long as you keep them alive. Engineering operators will restore your suit integrity, and science operators will refill your psi meter. On this floor, we've also got a staff lounge, with nothing of particular interest. There is a kitchen with lots of food and some pool tables and stuff, though this room is quite small. The IT department is also mostly empty, except for an interesting locked door. It can't be hacked and requires a keycard. There are 4 survivors tucked away inside, and you can confirm this with a security station. If you are playing through Prey, like a normal human being with feelings and emotions, they will stay there for the entire game, never interacting with you, and the room will be inaccessible. It is, of course, possible to get in there, but it requires a very particular course of action that we'll get to later. Browsing the security station lets us find a few more enclaves of survivors, particularly in the crew quarters, cargo bay, neuromod division, and the aforementioned closet. Let's move up to the final floor and start with Morgan's office, where January insists is an important video to watch. But first, we have to figure out a code. If you're at all familiar with ImSims, it will come as no surprise that the code is always 0451, in reference to the first code in System Shock, the game that all ImSims trace their lineage back to. But if you're not, you can read it off of Jason Chang's workstation just outside, the password for which is OMG Hot Boss. January will also call to tell it to you if you walk up to the office but then leave and spend some time away. The lobby is your hub area of the game, as it connects to a whopping 6 other levels, while most others only to 2 or 3. The office is fairly safe, and you will be returning to it regularly, as it's got a recycler and fabricator, and several safes and drawers you can store items in. Despite what January says, it's not a safe room. Enemies can still very much get in here and spot you through the giant window, but at least no Typhon will spawn in this room, so that's something. Let's get to watching this very important video.
Hello, Morgan. Tough day, right? If I'm talking to myself, it must be. Now, your memory's shot full of holes. I know. I'm sorry, but it's permanent. So the first thing you need to know is you can trust January. It's an operator, a sort of backup of you and me. It knows what you've forgotten. There's supposed to be a process to bring you back up to speed between test runs. But someone could just skip that part, turn a single day into your entire life. Well, that's exactly what Alex did. The question is, why? You're not gonna like what I have to say next.
I thought I found every one of those damn videos. Sorry, but I can't let you listen to that. Not until I've had a chance to explain everything in person. For now, just... Damn it. I have to go. Just sit tight. Please.
Sorry, Morgan. Alex cut us off from the Looking Glass servers. Time to improvise. I suggest you search Dr. Calvino's workshop in the hardware labs. He invented the Looking Glass technology. You might find a way to restore the server connections there. I'm looking for another way to help you in the meantime. Good luck.
This Lorenzo Calvino, brought up by January, is the engineer who invented the looking glass technology. As per audio logs and recordings we find later, he suffers from memory loss, despite never having removed the neuromod, and also is a fairly grumpy fella. Back in Matthias Cole's office, we find two variations of these Rorschach-style drawings, one of which appeared on the questionnaire in the intro. In the session log, he talks of a recurring nightmare he has, where he turns on a looking glass and sees an immense, sentient darkness.
But I can't help it. I have to turn it on. When I do, it's like the heart of a black hole.
What does it look like? The shape in the glass.
Nothing.
Does it look like this image here? Dr. Calvino, does it look like this?
No, that's... No, I don't...
Are you sure?
Where did you get that drawing? Have you been spying on me? I don't want to talk to you anymore.
A lot of the lines from this log are lines the Phantoms can say.
What does it look like? The shape in the glass.
What does it look like? The shape in the glass.
What do you see in the glass?
What do you see in the glass?
We can also infer Lorenzo is not the only one having this dream. Someone else made the drawing, and the resemblance is so uncanny that Lorenzo thinks he was spied on. Given that we were also shown this very drawing, it's clear something Typhon-like is infecting our minds. When it comes to the Phantom lines, each of them has access to all of these lines, regardless of which character said it. They don't even have to be dead, as a ton of quotes are pulled from a character that's still alive in this moment in time. The one common denominator is neuromods. It's as if using them also connects us into some collective unconscious, which taps into our minds, something that steers the Typhon as well. To get to the hardware labs, we will have to pass through the teleconferencing center, where we pick up a silenced pistol off of Elias Black. It's the standard issue security firearm on Talos 1 and has an integrated suppressor so that it doesn't deafen everyone within the metal corridors. It's weak, but can be upgraded to have great accuracy, and it can be spammed as fast as you can press the trigger. Sales Division is the last room of note in the lobby, where we can meet another named Phantom, Yuri Kimura. Their office is right there, and an interesting excerpt from an internal memo reads, "What I find far more worrying, though, are these reports of memory loss during neuromod removal. If this leaks, it'll kill neuromod sales. Doesn't matter if you need specialized equipment and training to take one out. As far as the consumer is concerned, neuromods are permanent." More than that, it seems Yuri and Elias both aren't the most honest employees, as the former tried smuggling this pack of neuromods back to Earth, and the latter blackmailed him to keep his mouth shut. If you're a fan of strange and unique gameplay systems and immersive sims, you have to walk over to the other cubicle and pick up the Huntress Boltcaster. It's a toy crossbow that fires foam darts with capacitive tips. It's completely harmless, but its main purpose is to activate buttons and interact with workstation screens from far away. It's honestly insane how useful this is. Once you get into the mind space of looking at the environment with great attention, there's a ton of locked rooms with a workstation facing a window that conveniently has a prompt to open the door, or little holes you can target a tiny button through. Once you notice this, it's impossible not to notice it everywhere in the game. It's a great tool, and it lets you get into many areas you'd otherwise need neuromods for. Since the bolts are physical projectiles, they can even bounce around. Back in the trauma center, there's a locked office we can't get into yet, but it is possible to shoot the wall and bounce the bolt back to hit the button that's on the other side you can't see from here. It's very hard and there's nothing to go off of, so I've only ever managed to do this once. That's all I had to say about the Talos 1 lobby for now. Up next is going to be the hardware labs, full of interesting and vibrant little human stories. It's also potentially my favorite area to explore, gameplay wise. The threat ramps up in new, unexpected ways. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I hope you liked the video. If you do, I would really appreciate if you hit like and subscribe. I want to get monetized, which would help me spend more time and effort making these videos. So if you want to see that, you know what to do. Thank you, bye bye.